Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 84. What can Tacs teach us about vulnerability mitigation and remediation? So, Tacs, man. As a kid, I used to love them. Little orange guys, oh man, make my breath smell so orangey. They were great. Mint, I'm not a mint guy, so I can't stand mint. Now Tacs come in all sorts of flavors: blueberry, raspberry, elderberry, whatever. You name it, they got it. Tacs, one of the best selling points. They even made a whole marketing scheme off this. You shake the little container they're in, man, they make noise. It's kind of cool. Like baby rattle for adults. It's crazy. Anyway, Tacs. I don't know if you've ever looked at the nutritional information on a Tac box. It's very small. And you'll notice that on the nutritional information, the calorie count says 0. And that's interesting because if you also look at the ingredients list, the number one ingredient is sugar. So this is something that is made with pure sugar, regular sugar, the sugar that you have probably on your kitchen counter at the moment. It is made with that, yet has 0 calories. Well, how is that possible? Well, that is possible because there is a loophole in the FDA laws surrounding reporting of calorie content. And it states that any food or substance that can be ingested, if the calorie content is less than 5 calories, it can be rounded down to 0. And this was in effect to make it so that things like condiments and shit you just add your food didn't have to have calories listed on them. Because when was the last time you checked on the calorie content of your ketchup? So the entire reason for this, a little flawed, but in the end, not a big deal. We don't want to have to put a whole bunch of weight on things that 5 calories here or there doesn't really matter. So that they dropped it, but then you get into this situation. So imagine this. This is something that actually has happened. There was a guy. He wanted to lose weight. He was a little overweight. 230, 240, and he's like 6 feet tall. I don't know. The guy gave his stats in the story, and I'll add it to the notes if I can find it again. Anyway, he wanted to lose weight, and he tried his best. He did all the things. He went running, lifted weights, worked out regularly. He watched his diet, and he was gaining weight. And as he tried to supplement his food with protein shakes. He tried starvation diets. He tried everything he could think of to lose weight, and he just wasn't losing weight. And so he went to his doctor, and he was like, "Doctor, man, how can I lose weight? Is there something wrong with me? Do I have like some problem with my body that's causing me to gain weight constantly? Because I am getting heavier and heavier. I've tracked my calories. I'm only eating 1,000 calories per day, but I'm still gaining weight. What the hell?" And so, the doctor does a bunch of tests, draws his blood, does normal doctory things. Can't find anything. Well, it comes a visit where the dude has one of his packs of Tacs with him, and he pounds the entire thing of Tacs. And the doctor looks at him and he goes, "Hey, wait, are you, how many Tacs do you eat a day?" And he goes, "Oh, probably 5 or 6 boxes a day." And the doctor goes, "No fucking wonder you're not losing weight. Tacs are sugar. They are pure sugar." And the guy was like, "What they say, 0 calories on the box." Is like, yeah, that's a lie. And so, that is the danger of that 0 calorie mark, because it's a misrepresentation of the actual calorie content that Tacs have. And with all of their really nice and really fun flavors, it can be dangerous to kind of believe that lie because this guy, he was trying to lose weight, and honestly, if Tic Tacs were labeled properly, he probably wouldn't be have that big of a problem with it. But all that being said, Tic Tacs have a calorie content, and that's something that if you actually read and knew what the hell the ingredients list had, you'd be able to see that. Now, all industries are required to list the total calorie content of the container, which is nice. So now this will probably be less of a problem, but still, if it's less than 5 calories and it's listed as 0, there are about 38 of them bastards in that little Tic Tac box. So you're talking probably about 50 calories a box, and that stacks up over time. So to relate this to remediation and vulnerability remediation and mitigation, one of the things that we do have to cover, or two things that we have to cover, are what is remediation and what is mitigation. And these are important terms to understand. If you are just getting into IT or wanting to take your Security Plus, you're going to have to know these terms and their book definitions specifically. And I'm not going to give you the book definitions because, well, the book definitions are bland and stupid, and mine are funny and hilarious. Right? Right, guys? Anyway, remediation is the removal of a vulnerability from being executed, meaning it no longer exists. This is effectively an entire change in the makeup of the technology that the vulnerability affects. So if you are attempting to remediate a vulnerability, you're removing the ability for it to be executed against. Whereas mitigation is the crafting of policies and controls so that a vulnerability cannot be exercised under normal circumstances. And so we'll give you a couple of examples. So for remediation, you can remediate something say for instance, a company has a flaw in their login page that allows for somebody to bypass the authentication. And the vendor who makes that product, patches that page so that it's no longer possible. Well, that's a remediation based on whatever they did in the backend software, like removing the bypass page or whatever. They have remediated the vulnerability. A mitigation would be, instead of updating, I decide I am going to limit where logins can occur into the device so that an attacker can't access that page under normal circumstances. And so, I isolate the device away from everything else, and so that it's only accessible from one particular point. That's a mitigation. Another form of mitigation would be, I have a technology that is legacy. So we'll use SMBv1 as an example. I have SMBv1 enabled on my server. And instead of disabling the SMBv1 service, I instead craft a firewall rule that prevents the communication of the SMB protocol through that firewall. The communication is effectively limited, but the vulnerability still exists, so it's a mitigation. Now, remediation would be to completely disable the vulnerability or the SMB service, or completely disable the vulnerable service. Those are examples of mitigation and remediation. And again, remember, the difference between them is that in a mitigation, the vulnerability still fucking exists. And that's where we're going to get to, is that if you mitigate a vulnerability, you are not at zero risk. There is still risk. It's called residual risk. You have to understand what your residual risk is in the mitigation of a vulnerability. You have to understand that so you can craft the mitigation properly and also craft your policy properly. And Also, craft your response properly. Because if a vulnerability still exists within your environment and you mitigate it in a way that you think that you have zero risk, you're wrong. You immediately need to raise your hand and say, what am I missing here? There has to be some way to affect this in a way that can make this problem a significant issue. Anyway, the whole point of this being is that when you're operating within the terms of remediation and mitigation, a remediation actually takes a significant amount of change in the underlying structure of whatever it is that is vulnerable. A remediation is not a small change. I mean, it can look like a small change with an update or whatever, but it's fundamental change, whereas a mitigation changes the external aspects of the device. So it's kind of like changing the color or changing the packaging of the label to say no calories. And so that's where you'll get into trouble. As an example of this, to tie it back to Tic Tacs, if Tic Tacs actually wanted to be 0 calorie, they could do it. One of the most popular sugar-free or sugar alternatives out there is a chemical called xylitol. Xylitol is a natural byproduct of certain plants and is a defense mechanism. It attracts certain animals, but also prevents them from eating those plants. So you're an animal, you're looking for something to eat, you smell something sweet. Sweet means berries. I'm going to go towards that. But then you're walking across and you don't find the thing that is sweet. Instead, you find this thing that tastes like it's hollow and terrible. And so you leave it alone. But the plant has done its job because you've passed by it and it's been able to attach seeds or pollen or whatever to your fur. This plant is attracting you through the scent of xylitol or the sweetener. And it is a mechanism or a chemical that can be used to simulate sugar. We as humans do a lot of eating poisons in our normal life, whether it be alcohol, beer, or caffeine. Caffeine's a poison, whether or not you know it. It's a poison. And xylitol, sugar-free sweeteners. These are all poisons. They're mild and may not have a total impact on our full operation as a being. Although, without caffeine, I might crumble and die. The whole point is that we use these in our normal everyday lives to bypass some of the requirements of or trick ourselves into enjoyment. And xylitol is one of those things we do. And in order to become 0 calorie, Tic Tac would have to utilize xylitol in their recipe. However, xylitol, because it's a mild poison, has a very interesting side effect. And rather than describe to you what xylitol does to the human body, I'm actually just going to read you a review. Now, if you've been on the internet for a while and you have combed the depths of it like, I and many of my cohorts have, you'll probably have heard this before. And as soon as I say the product name, you're probably going to know. And some of you may have already picked up on it. But Haribo Gold Bears Gummy Bears, sugar-free, is made with pure xylitol. And there is a review, this is an Amazon review, out there that is absolutely amazing. And I'm just going to read it to you. It was my last day of class of the semester, and final exam was worth 30% of our grade. After a late night study session, I felt confident, but I had to decide between sleeping in or cooking breakfast. My eyelids chose sleep. My stomach later regretted this decision, and after an uncomfortable stomach growls, I finally decided to make a quick stop by the campus bookstore and grab a snack before my test. Since the semester was ending and everyone was going home for the summer, a lot of items were on sale, including the snacks and candy they kept up front. Being in the hungry state it was in, it felt only logical to pick the largest yet least expensive candy in order to get more bang for my buck. And there they sat, 2 bags of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. You buy one, get one free. What a deal, I thought naively. I would eat 1 bag before my test and 1 bag afterwards. As I walked to class, I gleefully chewed on those abominable little bastards and unaware of the utter mayhem that they would soon unleash upon my poor anus. I sat down at my desk as the professor informed us, due to issues with cheating in the past, restroom breaks would be prohibited until the completion of the exam. I'll give you 10 minutes to use the restroom now. This will be your last chance. Any takers? The demon bears hadn't released their unholy necromancy upon my stomach yet, so in my moment of ignorant foolishness, I remained seated, still munching on those miniature bear-shaped bombs. After the students wise enough to take the professor's offer had returned, the professor handed out the test. I was 6 questions in when it happened. It started subtly at first, almost like a slight tingly sensation in my lower abdomen. I thought nothing of it, assuming my intestines were just doing their thing. Little did I know that my intestines were trying desperately to warn me of the horror that was on the horizon. By question 9, it happened again, but this time I was followed by a sharp pain as if those intestinal hellions had orchestrated an attack on my colon. I fought to contain the groan that tried escaping my lips. It was at this point that I began to panic. Something was going horribly wrong, horribly long, intentional misspelling. And I needed to get through this test before it got any worse. By question 14, my worst fear was upon me. The Satan bears, burning hot, liquidy, dark magic crashing against my anal sphincter like a tidal wave. I was able to close the hatch just in time, but those relentless, toxic bears beat against it like orcs breaking down the doors of Helm's Deep. I knew I wouldn't be able to so much as shift in my seat without risking a breach. I kept fighting through my exam, clenching my cheeks with all my might, beads of sweat rolling down my neck. Suddenly, a loud gurgling war cry came from my belly, and the entire class lifted their heads. At this point, nothing mattered except expelling this ungodly presence from my bowels. With 15 questions left, I promptly wrote C for every answer and ran out of the classroom, my professor yelling something, but I was too preoccupied with the volcanic eruption that needed to take place before I could find sweet relief. I burst into the restroom like a Kool-Aid man, and behold, the handicapped stall was empty. Sun rays from adjacent windows shone upon it as if it were the gift from God. It took me less than 0.5 seconds to do my belt buckle, pull down my pants, and finally relax my weird buttocks upon the toilet seat. It took absolutely no effort to expel this demon. Almost immediately, the floodgates of hell opened and the damned liquefied souls of an entire bag's worth of gummy bears cried as they burned through my sphincter into the watery abyss below. I had never felt such simultaneous relief and anguish in my life. After 30 minutes of this, I immediately went home, dug a hole in my backyard, and burned the remaining bag of gummy bears. Leave with this. Do not eat these spawns of Satan. Not only did they cause me to fail my final test, but the anguish I experienced is something I wouldn't wish upon anyone, not even my worst enemy. The only place these godforsaken hell bears belong are buried deep below the earth's surface. So, that's what xylitol does to you. And xylitol is, again, it is a significant change in the recipe of Tic Tacs. And it's kind of like remediation. Sometimes remediation is going to have significant change in the way that your stuff operates. Sometimes it's just a light change, such as if instead Haribo had used sucralose, which is a sugar alternative that does not have sphincter-related symptoms or sphincter-related issues, then you could effectively have sugar-free Tic Tacs without having the necessity of, pooping your guts out. Now, the whole entire point of this is that you can have remediations that significantly change the impact of your or the outlook of your technology. Certain updates can change the vast majority of a page or the vast majority of how a technology operates. Sometimes they can just be small changes, but the underlying code has changed, which will affect the remediation. And mitigations are things that we build around those vulnerabilities. So instead of, calling Tic Tac 0 calorie, if they had instead made it so that you have to burn 1.6 calories to open up and get a single Tic Tac, that might be a way to get around having to call them 0 calorie or having to call out the 1.6 calories a piece. So you could effectively mitigate your vulnerability by crafting a different process or control around it. So all that being said, if you are mitigating a vulnerability, if you are in mitigation of a vulnerability, make sure that you are aware of the residual risk, because it is not something that is necessarily apparent. You will have to analyze and understand your network and the things around it to comprehend your residual risk. And for instance, one of the most popular ways to mitigate a vulnerability instead of updating it is to isolate servers or isolate the service or isolate whatever it is. I'll give you an example. One of the most common things I see across healthcare organizations is that they want to keep all of their records from their previous electronic record system. Now, they're only required to keep records for up to, I believe it's up to 7 years. But a lot of companies, a lot of organizations choose to keep their records for much, much, much longer. Anyway, what will end up happening is that companies, as Microsoft says, "Oh, we're going to sunset this server operating system. You'll no longer receive updates after this particular date." You'll see companies migrate or move their EHR to the newer operating system, but they'll leave the old servers still up and running because they want to have access to those older records. And so you'll see old servers sitting around. I have an organization right now that has 2003 servers sitting within their organization. And the way that they've chosen to mitigate the risk of having the server up, ignoring all of my protestations, is they have put this device in isolation. It's on its own VLAN that cannot be accessed via firewall rules. It cannot be accessed from anywhere except from a single workstation that is basically adjacent to that device. And that workstation can only be accessed from a single entry point. It can only be remoted into from a specific management VLAN. And so this is a mitigation. And some of you who might be security practitioners might have spotted the flaw there, wherein that, okay, what's keeping the other system? You've now added another system to this mitigation. What is keeping that other system from being compromised? And that's kind of the key point. If you are targeted enough at gaining access to that device, you can gain access to that device. Just because you've put it away in a corner does not make the risk zero. You still have to understand how that device can be attacked. Also, you have to understand that, what if I misconfigured something? What if you misconfigured something? What happens if somebody down the line fucks something up and it's a misconfiguration that allows more access to that device? Those are all considerations that you have to have in your residual risk. So constant testing to ensure that the device is actually that the mitigation is still in place is kind of a requirement. You have to do that. Now, when you are calculating your residual risk, it is important to understand how likely it is that could happen. And oftentimes, like breaching a mitigation can be very difficult. If you've properly isolated a challenging device on your network, it would be very difficult rather to get around that, unless, I as an attacker have some insider information or know some more other things about your environment. But also, there's always the opportunity for somebody to leave the door open. We as humans are the biggest attack vector. We are the biggest area in which something can go wrong and therefore cause a significant outage or challenge or security issue within our organization. Now, all that being said, one of the ways that would have been appropriate for this company to mitigate this problem and retain nearly zero risk would have been to keep the device in an unpowered state while it is also isolated on that VLAN. So only powered on via a single process. And when it's powered on, have something that automatically powers it off after being online for a certain period of time. So not only is the device powered off and can't be powered on at a regular time, but also even if it gets powered on and left on, it powers itself off to make sure that there's no persistent risk that exists in the organization. These are all things that you can do. And these are different ways that you could mitigate the same problem. And that's not to say that when you make a mitigation that it can't be fully and totally effective, because powering it off, that's pretty fucking effective. Can't hack something if it's not online. Can't hack something if it doesn't have power to it. You hear some idiot in the back saying that that's not true, and it's shut up. This is an edge case. That's an edge case, and we're not going to cover it. Anyway, whole point being is if it's powered off, it's mitigation, it's risk, it definitely goes a hell of a lot closer to zero. So as you are attempting to remediate and mitigate your vulnerabilities and bring your risk as close to zero as you can, make sure that you're not ignoring the small risks. Make sure you're not ignoring the risks after mitigation, because those still do exist, and you can put yourself in a very awkward position if you are eating nothing but Tic Tacs and still gaining the weight. That's all I got time for today, guys. I hope you all have a great day.